Hi, this is Starkie Sowers, Director of Education for Clark's Nutrition and Natural Foods Market.
And I'm Graig Doussett, Assistant Director of Education for Clark's Nutrition and Natural Foods Market.
Welcome to Health Matters, an educational video series about nutrition, health, and supplementation. Hi, this is Starkie Sowers.
And I'm Graig Doussett.
Welcome again to another edition of Health Matters. This month we're going to be talking about probiotics. So probiotics, I mean, we had a couple cuts and a few things in between here, and so we got kind of warmed up and we're ready to roll. And so once again though, we can't start the whole concept of probiotics without talking about Eli Mishnikov. So Eli Mishnikov, Russian biologist, protozoologist, zoologist, Nobel Peace Prize winner, 1908, all these different great attributes. So here's this guy, over 100 and some odd years ago, he starts looking at human intestinal bacteria and says, look, here's the deal. I'm noticing that there's some positive bacteria and negative bacteria, and this positive bacteria creates a huge difference in the human system. So, he starts identifying things such as Lactobacillus acidophilus, Bacillus, Bulgaricus, things as those being the three dominant, real most important positive bacteria for human health. So, probiotics, tell me what you think about when you hear the word probiotics.
Well, when I first heard the word, I was thinking, what probiotic? It says, I've heard of antibiotic.
Right, and antibiotic meaning what?
Maybe against or anti-life, for example.
Right.
So probiotic, I thought was a very positive kind of word. I was like, well, I was kind of attracted to the word just because it means for life.
Yeah, and remember before, people really didn't call them probiotics. They were kind of called just good bacteria, or friendly bacteria was the terminology, or just acidophilus bacteria.
Generally speaking, there was something in foods, specifically fermented foods, that, for example, this gentleman and other people knew about, but they hadn't put the labels. They didn't know some of the science that we know now of all the health benefits. They saw some of the health benefits, but as we explore more about what probiotics are, the type of bacteria that live in us predominantly and on us.
Yeah, dude, and that was a weird concept because you're saying on us, and I'm like going, okay, dude, so there's like bacteria sitting on your skin.
There's tons of bacteria on our skin right now.
Yeah,
there's
everywhere, isn't there?
Tons of bacteria, and a lot of bacteria in our orifices or the openings, which actually are very protective and make sure there's a certain pH so that we can actually kind of fight against some of the weaker pathogens that are raining down upon us all the time.
So that's kind of a big term. I mean, we throw out a bunch of stuff, and so let's think pH right away. So potential hydrogen is the typical name for pH. But, let's think of the word that's typically associated with probiotics, which is acidophilus.
Acidophilus.
So wait a minute, acidophilus.
Right, it's a bacteria that produces predominantly lactic acid.
So lactic acid. So it actually produces an acid medium or an acid balance. And so actually we're supposed to have and this is kind of contrary to a lot of what's going on right now, but when it comes to the saliva pH, it's supposed to be about 6.4 to 6.8, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay, so wait a minute. So if you take that big pH scale, so to speak, 0 being at the end of acid, 14 being at the end of alkaline, 7 being neutral in the middle, 6.4 to 6.8 is what? Acid or alkaline?
It's acidic.
So it is acidic, and the reason why is because it kind of prevents certain microorganisms from actually being able to grow in our mouth. Is that true?
That's partly true. That's part of the story. One of the things about acidophilus, or at least acidophilus, is when we do the saliva test, if there's an overload of acidophilus, the pH can come down too low, and that's actually one of the ways that they can show dental caries, or that's one of the ways they can see if there's too much of a load for cavities to occur. Right. So like everything, we need a balance. Like everything, there needs to be a balance.
Right, and so that bacteria that's in there, Streptococcus mutans, is typically fed by sucrose. So sucrose would be a bad sugar to use in this situation for dental caries. Right?
Too much of anything is going to be bad, but you got to watch out because it will feed some of the Streptococcus mutans. It causes that plaque, and then if the pH gets too low, and we're not going to go into the whole fluoride thing, but if the pH gets too low, then there's going to be an increase in dental caries.
All right, so let's get back on track. So let's talk about probiotics. So you think about the term probiotics, and it means, for life, right? And so we kind of talked a little bit about this concept of antibiotics. So, it's so common. I mean, my kid gets sick, and we try the natural stuff, stuff sometimes, and eventually mom says, okay, I want to go get an antibiotic, and so we go get an antibiotic. So let's talk about that. So an antibiotic is what? Something that
fights bacteria in the body. Specifically, either it's going to be a bacteria that is going to be susceptible to a broad spectrum antibiotic, or which would be weaker, or something that's going to be a little bit tougher bug or a tougher strain.
Right.
So this person is taking an antibiotic to get rid of this overgrowth of bacteria.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're using an antibiotic, but now all of a sudden we're talking about probiotics, and these probiotics or probacteria are good, favorable bacteria or friendly bacteria that are going to help to colonize or actually nourish the intestinal area full of these favorable bacteria, having some very unique effects. Number one, it seems that when the good bacteria are winning the war against the bad bacteria, because there's over 500 bacteria that are in your intestinal tract. So when the good bacteria are winning the war, producing lactic acid, what it does is it almost crowds out or prevents the bad bacteria from being able to rise up and take over. So what are some of the cool effects that happen with the good bacteria?
Like Starkie mentioned, we can crowd out, or we can make sure that the bad bacteria is held in check with good bacteria. One of the great effects is that we have a really good bowel transaction time occurring. That's very important.
So healthy bowel movements.
Healthy bowel movement makes sure that what goes in is in us for the right amount of time, and then it goes out at the right amount of time.
So wait a minute, I can't just like hold my food in my system and pack it away for a couple months?
I would prefer that you didn't.
Oh, okay. I was just curious about that. I didn't know if that was like something that was important.
We don't have 4 stages to our stomach like certain other animals on the planet,
like
so we have to get rid of stuff pretty fast. The other great thing about probiotics, one of the other great things, is that as it starts to create a really good environment, we actually can absorb certain minerals better. Calcium, iron, zinc, and copper
I forgot about that.
are very important and semi-dependent on good bacteria.
Okay, so absorption of minerals, number
absorption
one.
of minerals.
So keeping the bad bacteria at bay is another great thing that
huge.
So that's going to help. And we know we've seen all sorts of crazy research all over the planet lately. It seems like when that good bacteria balance is favorable, then what happens is the bad bacteria stays down, and so it actually prevents the body from being susceptible to certain types of infiltration of disease and things of that nature. Now, at the same time, that's what's kind of interesting too. When we deal with that good bacteria balance, we also know that it actually kind of modulates the immune system. And I say modulate. A lot of people think, well, hey,
it's a good word.
I don't want to just, or some people think, well, I'm sick, I'm going to take acidophilus, or I've got some type of disease, I'm going to take acidophilus. Mind you, modulate means to balance. So it's not going to like way overstimulate or do anything, to bring the immune system under or bring it below. What it does is it modulates. It kind of helps to bring a healthy balance to the immune system. So we now know that the intestinal tract literally, helps to balance the immune system, T cell production, B cell production, all these different things from the immune system, real crazy. And Menshikov 100 years ago was saying that. He was saying, hey, look, here's the deal. He kind of believed that the whole intestinal thing was related to, all diseases. And, in a way, he was a little bit right, but, and a lot of his theories have yet to be proven.
Sure.
But
what I like,
concepts, I think, might have been on the idea.
When we get into a little bit more about the prebiotics or the food for the bacteria, I think we'll talk a little bit about the immune system effects, because when we start to get fibers in our body, and we'll talk about the soluble and insoluble, we start to release beta-glucans, specifically from barley and from oats. Huge
rice.
For the immune system. Huge for the immune system. We're also able to ferment certain fibers, and we can produce vitamin K. Very important for the the blood system. And we can also reduce the amount of nitrogen and bacteria that gets reabsorbed in the body. It's very important that we make sure that, once again, what goes in goes out at the right time, because we can reabsorb things that our body already dealt with. Your body said, hey, listen, you took this in, I already dealt with it, I put it out, and if for some reason it's showing back up, it's because we don't have enough of the good fibers and bacteria.
It's almost kind of like taking the trash out of the house and then having somebody bring it back into the kitchen.
Great example. That's a great example. And if you do that in my house, you're not coming back.
You're not coming
back.
back.
But we do that to our bodies.
But we do, though, don't we? And
our
so
bodies
that was
forgive
one
us.
of the things that Menshikov saw. He said, well, look, here's the deal. I know when these favorable bacteria are here, the intestinal toxins are much less. And you're right, there's some great studies that actually indicate while having a good, healthy bacteria balance, the body's much more able to eliminate certain pathogens and or metabolites. And here's a great one, is like estrogen. So we know that estrogen actually, the body eliminates it. You know, it goes through liver channels, it goes through the bile, and then it's eliminated. And there's some bad estrogens, such as like 17-beta estradiol, which is, you know, linked to certain cancers and different things of that nature. And we're not saying that acidophilus cures disease or anything like that. We're just saying it's a healthy, beneficial thing for the prevention of certain disease. But we know that when there's healthy bacteria, then all of a sudden the body's able to attach that estrogen and eliminate it from the body. So that's just like one illustration. And there's multitudes more that are there. But I kind of wanted to hit this on this one thing. You talked about skin, you know, there being bacteria like on the skin. So tell me a little bit about that. I mean, that's kind of freaky. You know, I mean, you go down the street and you think that, you know, I took a shower and I'm clean and I'm good to go. We know that soap gets rid of bacteria for like a good 4 or 5 hour duration, then it starts growing back like a weed. So, but you know, a lot of people don't know that. Sorry to scare you if you don't know that. But ultimately, so what are we looking at here with this skin thing? You know, where are we at? Tell me a little bit about that.
One of the things this bacteria does is it helps the skin maintain the pH. That's very important for the immune system. And that's going to be very important when we get into part 2 of what we're going to talk about, which is immune system, diarrhea for children, and specifically for irritable bowel syndrome.
Great. All right, so this skin thing, we've got this bacteria balance going on, helps to prevent, and you know, so if you think about your skin and you think about, you know, it's kind of like your armor. So if you've got this bacteria here, unfavorable bacteria, and let's face it, I mean, here's the window. I mean, just rub it up. There's bacteria everywhere. So every time we're in contact with something, we're coming in contact with E. coli or some different types of bacteria, and the skin acid mantle actually is like something that fights that off. So it, you know, doesn't invade or intrude our system, where the immune system actually has to attack it and take care of it. So
that's a great. I think the word armor is excellent, and I don't want to scare the hypochondriacs out there, but bacteria is raining down on us. If we could actually see, it's raining down on us, and a lot of the things that has improved specifically to help out with the females is it lowers. If you have enough yeast infections and vaginitis, that's very, very important.
Right.
That we talk about that armor, because that's also important. One thing I also want to mention for children and probiotics, because we kind of have mentioned ourselves, we're men, we mentioned women, but with children,
kids, don't we?
Kids, yeah, especially if they do have to go through a round of antibiotics, what happens is they become more susceptible to this kind of nasty bug called Clostridium difficile, and it's the #1 cause of diarrhea in children during antibiotic rotations. So by getting the probiotics in there, take it about 4 hours away from the antibiotic, you can help reduce the diarrhea. When you do that, they don't lose their minerals as much, they don't lose some of their good stuff.
Dehydration possibilities.
Dehydration, huge. You have to talk about.
And so then also, I mean, like, let's go back to all of us. We all jump in the car, we take off, and we go somewhere for, you know, a vacation. And you know, we drove up north last year. We went up and to see my aunt and uncle up in Redding, California, Lake Shasta. And so, you know, like about, you know, 6 or 8 hours into it, you know, everyone's like going, "Oh, Dad, my stomach." You know, and I'm thinking to myself, there's no way we got traveler's diarrhea. But I brought some probiotics. I brought with me one that was a shelf-stable product, and that was by enzymatic therapy. And we started taking, within like a matter of a couple hours, we're all going, "Oh, my stomach feels so much better." So that's like a great illustration.
That's a good one.
Traveler's diarrhea, common for people that are out traveling about and moving, you know, whether it's jet or boat or whatever the case might be. Acidophilus always seems to make things a little bit better.
Within hours, you were able to recolonize what was being kind of beat up by this other invading army.
Yeah.
You were able to reinforce your troops, and then that's incredible. It's something that can literally occur within hours.
So let me ask you this, okay? So we worked in the stores like for, you know, between the two of us, like 50 some odd years or something ridiculous like. Okay, so think about this. What are some of your favorite probiotic products? I mean, for me, one of my #1 favorite products is the Clark's Liquid Acidophilus. It's got the original Dr. Mishnikov strains in it. And so for me, that's huge, because the guy who makes that for us, he actually went to Europe, got the Mishnikov strains, brought them back in the 60s to the United States. He created almost every single liquid acidophilus that there is available, and we actually have it, and it's like ridiculously cheap and high potency. It's like awesome stuff.
That's one of my favorites as far as a liquid goes, because it's very versatile, because whether you do need to use it in an orifice, for example, if a child has thrush, put a little bit on the gums.
Right.
Females can use it as well. One thing that's so great is I have people come up and go, this is blueberry flavored, right? There's sugar in there. I'm like, yeah. Because it feeds the bacteria.
Yeah, and that's a thought, though.
It's viable.
We're feeding the bacteria,
it becomes viable for a lot longer period. So that's why the Clarks are so good. My favorite is going to be PB8, of course.
You like the PB8?
Because there's 8 different strands of probiotics. So they work in different sections of the intestinal tract, which could be good for those individuals who are suffering from irritable bowel or from Crohn's, which can occur in different parts of your intestinal tract. So if you don't know, go with Mo.
Go with Mo.
I just made that. So you can go with a little bit more strains unless you want this really strong strain, which the original Menschnikoff strain.
And they've got some of the strains that are actually good for a couple different spots in the colony. But you're right, a lot of and we've seen all sorts of different bacteria hit the market. PB8, you look at Gyrodophlus, definitely one of my favorite ones. Another one of my favorite ones that I've liked throughout the years is good old Udo's, kind of a little bit unique.
Oh, yeah.
I like his flora.
His is good because it separates, right? You have for the younger, and you have for the adults, and that's an excellent.
Still a favorite of mine is Nature's Way. I like their Rootery formula. That's a great particular product, especially like post antibiotics and things.
That's a great one. Specifically, when we're talking about for the children's diarrhea, that Rootery is one of the best. Also for females, the Rhamnosus tends to be a very good strain too, if you're having or susceptible to more frequent yeast infections.
Right,
that
exactly.
was a really good one.
All right, so now you made a mention though, and it kind of makes me a little bit interested. So we talked about sugars, actually feeding bacteria. And so we know that bacteria feed on sugars, and some of the bad bacteria as well as the good bacteria. But when it comes, there's a whole term that really just kind of got popular like in the late 80s or early 90s, and I think it's actually become something real now. It's called prebiotics.
Prebiotics, yeah.
So tell me your thoughts on prebiotics.
It's the food or the what we give to the probiotics so that they can flourish.
Yeah, because they're going to grow.
So they can colonize.
Right. And that's the good bacteria that we want to colonize.
Right. So prebiotics, specifically, if you think about it, even simple sugars and processed sugars can be prebiotics.
Absolutely.
But what we want to emphasize for good health are the good soluble fibers. We also have things like called inulin, which can come from FOS. Inulin can come from either Jerusalem artichoke or from chicory. There's also from some other sources.
Some bananas. Banana actually has a little bit in there. Yeah.
So there's some really good places where we can selectively feed the good and selectively starve the bad, because a lot of the bad bacteria can't survive on some of these different structures.
Right.
So what we do is we take away some of the simple sugars and we include more of the fibers, and we can actually selectively starve the bad bacteria.
And while feeding the good bacteria.
Yeah. So that's important. And what I want to emphasize when we really quick talk about two different types of fibers, soluble and insoluble. Soluble, we're talking about, oats, some of the pectins, the guar gums, the psyllium, that can actually become fermented by the good bacteria.
Right.
And that can actually produce more of the good bacteria. Whereas insoluble fiber, when we talk about, for example, flax or wheat brands and corn brands, those are just bulk.
Flush it out. Right?
Yeah, that's the rotor-rooter type.
Now, I think what's important too to remember, reiterate as well too, is these bacteria, if you're ingesting them on a regular basis, they kind of build up real nice and they keep that nice bacteria balance. After about 7 days, they start to dissipate a little bit. So I think that was the idea on yogurt and kefir and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I love the Lifeway kefir, the Hilo kefir. Those things, I'll put them on my cereal and kind of on my berries and kind of make up like a little type of like a dessert at night for my kids. Chop up a bunch of fruit, put some yogurt and put some of the kefir on it, and then put it out there, and they think, oh wow, hey, that's great, Dad. They don't really identify that I'm like feeding them probiotics on a regular basis, and they go, oh, that tastes good. But those are like some things I think that everyone really tried to get everybody back in the 100 years ago. Menschnikoff was getting people to eat the yogurts on a regular basis just to constantly flourish and nourish those bacteria into the system.
What you're saying is so important, because it's something that you have to do on a daily basis. It's not you fill up your car with gas and you're good to go for 2 months or whatever.
Well, that would be nice.
That would be nice, not yet.
Yeah.
But what happens is, for example, getting that good bacteria on a daily basis, and you can do it from yogurt, you can do it from sauerkraut, you can do it from kimchi, you can do it through miso, from tempeh. There's a kefir, which is one of my favorites, but it's something you really have to do on a fairly regular basis to keep those colonies high.
Yeah,
and some of the other good effects, one effect that they have studied, at least for a relationship with cardiovascular disease, is if you can increase your fiber, total fiber, that's great. But if you can also increase the insoluble at the same time, there's an equal percentage of protection.
Right.
So it's very important that you do all fibers.
You know, it's interesting. All of a sudden, you know, there's one specific bacteria strain, the Lactobacillus sporogenes, that we actually know that kind of eats cholesterol as a food. So we actually know that that's one of those bacteria that is associated with helping with managing healthy cholesterol levels.
One thing I have to say because I learned it from Starkie first, and then I heard it from 50 other smart people. So this is important.
50 other smart people.
No, on top of the first smart person is when we talk about fiber, it's so important to also talk about cholesterol and how, one, it can bind to cholesterol in your digestive tract and remove it. Two, it can bind to bile and remove that bile, so then your body has to make more bile, pulls cholesterol from all different spaces.
And makes HDL to do that.
And makes more HDL, so it can raise your HDL, it can lower your total cholesterol. But it's so important that we understand that that fiber that we're getting on a daily basis can also affect what we call our blood lipids, or the fat in the blood. So that's one thing every textbook has said. Starkie is right. I don't even know why I read anymore. I'm just going to listen to you.
No. I'm just going to listen to you.
Great stuff, though. It's very, very
important.
important.
Should I just pay you now?
Well, it's very important that you get that fiber on a daily basis, specifically if you have the high total cholesterol. It's something that can be very important. One thing I also like about getting soluble fiber in is when those probiotics break it down, we create what we call short chain fatty acids. Right. Those can also travel to the liver and reduce the amount of new cholesterol, or what we call de novo cholesterol. So it's so many ways that you can have positive benefit effects from fiber. There's so many ways.
Probiotics, the combo.
The combo. It's so many ways to affect good health.
So let's base it. All right, so now here we go. All right, let's put this all into practical application.
Shopping list?
Shopping list.
All right.
Let's do shopping list. Let's talk foods. Let's talk about things that we can use. You know, we'll button it up right here. So, okay, here's the shopping list. We're going to do maybe oatmeal, or maybe for me, what do they call them? A parfait, where you take some granola and you put in some kefir or some yogurt. Perfect list.
Yeah, get your oatmeal, get your parfait, your yogurts, pick up your PB8, pick up your enzymatic therapy, and pick up that Clark's Menschikoff strain.
Yeah, I love that Menschikoff strain.
That's awesome all you need.
This is Starkie Sowers.
I'm Craig Doussett
with Health Matters.